picked to work with is mud. So I'm just going to take a little bit of it here. Now I do have a paint palette, but if you don't have a paint palette, you might try a paper plate. You might try like a lid from a recyclable. So I'm just going to go ahead and pour a little bit of water. So one of the things that I want you to check out is what kind of lines can you make with it. Okay, so we're going to check out our line quality. Another thing that we're going to explore is maybe a value scale, or what colors we have available to us. Make sure you might put something underneath your workspace here. So I've got a big old paper. I've got plenty of paper towels on hand to help me kind of keep my mud in control. So I'm going to see what kind of lines and textures I can get. So I do have a paintbrush. Okay, so this is a lot of mud with just a little bit of water here. You can see I can get some different textures with it. Now, if you don't have paintbrushes, I have rounded up some different materials to show you as well. Now you don't have to try this many materials. I'm more just showing you some options here. So another thing I could do is take like a toilet paper tube, and I could take and cut along the bottom of it here. Just do some little itty bitty slits. Maybe I'll flip directions here. So this is all about getting creative and problem solving, right? So now I'm going to take and roll this up super small, okay? And I could even take and use a little bit of tape, or if I don't have tape, maybe I just take and twist the toilet paper tube. And then I dip the end in here, and let's see what happens. So it's a little bit bigger. It gives me some great texture, okay? All right, so we've seen lots of different textures and techniques. Now let's check out what we can do with some value, okay? So I'm going to use some watercolor concepts. So the more water that we have in our mixture, the lighter our color is going to be. So I'm going to start by adding just a little bit of water here. I like to start at my lightest and work to my darkest when I work with watercolor. So now that I've stirred this up, I'm going to take my brush or my Q-tip. I'm going to add it to one that has a lot of water. And then I'm going to test it out and see what does that color combination get me. Sorry. So here's my lightest. A lot of water, very little mud. Okay. Now I'm going to take a lot of water, but I'm going to add twice as much mud or dirt to it. And I'm going to paint in the next one. Now, one thing keep in mind with watercolor, we have to leave space between them, and I didn't here, so they're kind of merging together. So I might have to layer a little bit more to get more of the brown color that I want, okay? Or I might have to add a little bit more mud to it to make it a little darker. Okay, that one looks pretty good. So then my next color, I'm going to add quite a bit of mud to it. We want it to be darker. Now remember, leave a little bit of gap here. That'll help me control it so that the water doesn't go back and forth and even out my amount of mud that I'm working with. Okay, so I have drawn out my artwork. I've sketched out. I'm going to base it off Georgia O'Keeffe's artwork here. Now, one of the things that I might recommend if you're having trouble kind of thinking about the artwork or figuring out how to simplify it to work with the materials that you have, my recommendation, Google and see if you can come across a coloring page is based on the artwork, and sometimes seeing the simplified lines can really help you simplify it into easier shapes to work with for this. Okay, so I'm going to erase mine so it's nice and light. It's still there, I can still see it, my lightest here, so I'm going to start with that and kind of build up my base. Now one thing I'm noticing is the mud is settling. So I have to remember to stir. Now one thing to keep in mind, if this is anything like watercolors, the color is going to want to go wherever you have water. So sometimes what helps me when I'm doing stuff with watercolor is I kind of get my edges first and then add in my layers of paint to kind of build up my color once I have the area kind of mapped out where I want that color to be. And then where I have some darker spots within this shape that I've started on, I'm going to let it dry a little and then come back in and add some of those darker areas. So now I'm going to let this area dry a little bit. Now you can see it's kind of puddling here. If that happens, I can just have my paper towel and just let it kind of absorb up some of that.